I will quickly show you how I restore or clean up one of my old Rolingmetal videos that were shot with a Panasonic G3 camera and have lots of audio noise. Perhaps this is of some use to someone, and maybe someone can give me some ideas on how to improve my procedure. This is one of my old videos that I want to fix up. Let's listen to the sound quality.
Well, I can't scrap this lathe without ever testing it. So I stitched up the belt, tightened up the grips, put on some oil, and I chucked up a piece of aluminium.
As you could hear, lots of noise and breathing sounds. Let's open up this video in Audacity, a wonderful piece of free software. Before you can open up a video in Audacity, you need to install the FFmpeg library. And there are plenty of videos on how to do that online. I'm not going to bother you with this. The first thing I do is find a piece of clean noise. And this is very important for the result of the noise reduction effect. If you mess this up, the result can sound weird. I don't think this is clean enough. I will look further. I believe this piece is clean enough, and it only needs to be a short selection. Now let's apply the effect, and this is a two-stage operation. First you tell Audacity that the current selection is the noise that you want to remove, and then you widen the selection and apply the noise reduction. I always use the default settings. They work good enough for me. Let's listen to the result. Sounds good enough to me. Now you can repeat the same procedure and lower the noise even further, but I never do this. By the way, on my Panasonic G3 camera with an external microphone, I never use this effect. It records a lot less noise and it's not really worth the effort, but I do use it on my voiceover recordings. This is the start of the video. Now let's listen to it for a bit.
Well, I can't scrap this lathe without ever testing it. So I stitched up the belt.
It sounds distorted and it was probably recorded too loud, but more likely my pie hole was too close to the internal microphone. And other than lowering the volume, there's not much I can do about this, not as far as I know. Normally I would now run a macro that applies some effects and in the end normalizes the audio to -1 decibel, and that's a bit lower than the original. But in this case I'm going to set it to -5 decibel. For your information, the compressor and the loudness normalization effects use the default settings, and the graphical equalizer should boost the vocal range just a bit, but I have not found the perfect setting just yet. I guess it's a taste thing, but what is tasteful? I don't know, but I do know that people love some bass in a voice. Let's apply the effects using that macro I just showed. This takes a while and can get a bit slow with certain effects on longer videos. Now let's listen to the result.
Well, I can't scrap this lathe without ever testing it. So I stitched up the belt, tightened up the grips, put on some oil, and
I'm certainly no James Earl Jones or Barry White, but I can live with the result so far. I kinda have to, it's probably the best I can do. Now comes the next and most labor-intensive part of my audio cleanup, and that is using the Audacity envelope tool. But first I use a Nyquist script to set some control points every 3 seconds. It could be more or less, or even none, but 3 seconds works fine for me. I will post a link to the Nyquist code in the description below the video. Next I go through the complete track, raising and lowering certain parts. And this takes a bit of time, and you can certainly let your OCB shine in this step. But basically I level the speaking parts out and lower the air sucking and lips smacking bits. Sometimes I use another Nyquist tool to delete a bunch of control points, for if I want to lower the audio in a certain part of the track. For example, in this part of the track where an electric motor is running. So far I have not found a way to automate this work without the audio sounding bad. Deleting or replacing certain parts with blank noise just makes it sound odd. Alright, now I will go through the rest of the recording and then we will continue this in my video editor. Make a few slight changes, add some music and slap everything back together. By the way, a lot of this I do by looking at the shape of the waveform, otherwise it would take forever. I'm done with making the envelope for this recording. It took about 1.5 hours and that's for a 11-minute track. Let's save the work and then I'll start the video editor. Welcome in VideoPad, a simple video editor and my favorite at the moment. But you can probably do the same things in most editors. I'll start by cutting up the original video at the cutscenes. Later I'm going to add some video effects like a pan and zoom and perhaps some exposure compensation or a slight color correction. Now let's add the improved audio and compare the sound. Unless I made a stupid mistake, it should be just as long as the video. Now let's have a listen.
Well, I can't scrap this lathe without ever testing it. So I stitched up the belt. Well, I can't scrap this lathe without ever testing it. So I stitched up the belt, tightened up the gips, some oil, and I chucked up a piece of aluminium. This chuck has quite a bit of bell mouth. With the soft aluminium, it still grips it okay.
I would say that's a big improvement over the original, but I realize it is a bit subjective. The next thing I do is add a bit of exposure compensation to all of the clips. I'll start by using the default setting. Later I might lower or increase the value slightly. At the time this video was originally shot, I did not use an extra video light. Also, my old camera could only do fully automatic video, and there was no way I could dial in some extra exposure. Now I'm going to add a zoom effect to most of the clips, and perhaps also add some panning motion. People like to see some motion, and it makes a boring tripod shot just a slightly bit more interesting. Also, I like my videos zoomed in on the action, and by deleting the static space around the action, I think it makes it look better. Again, this is subjective, but since I'm the director, I get to decide. Sometimes I also apply a color correction, but not today. Next I add a fade through black transition to all of the cuts, in case the recut wasn't made exactly at the same position as the original. Fading through black just makes it hide the imperfections. Although I'm not big on using transitions, it makes the editing software run slower. And now I'm going to add some pictures and perhaps some annotations. And last but not least, I'm going to add some music. The last thing I do is export a video in 720p using a relatively low bitrate and then upload it. So in my next upload you get to see the final result and find out what kind of music I used this time. If you actually made it to the end of all this yada yada yada, I do hope you got something out of it. And if you have any tips or tricks on how I can get a better result, please put them in the comments below. Well, I'm not going to drag this out any longer. I will continue fixing up some old videos, and you all have a good day.